Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's HADeS competition webinar. You will hear a little bit of a pinging sound in the background whilst we admit all the attendees, so apologies for that. First things first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Giulia Lorenzini, and I'm the Innovation Funding Team Lead at Connected Places Catapult, and I will be the chair for today's webinar. So hopefully you're all in the right place today. We are here to discuss the newly funded competition led by Connected Places Catapult and the Department for Transport, and specifically the National Security, Science and Research Division at the DFT. I'll be soon joined by various colleagues from the DFT who will be introducing today's topic. So a couple of housekeepings before we get started with the introduction. You'll see as you enter the Teams meeting, you are automatically muted. However, you are more than welcome to share your questions in the Q&A function that you'll see at the top of your screen. We would ask you that you put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, so that we can get back to you a bit more promptly when we get to the Q&A at the end. We will try to answer some questions as we go if we can, but we do have a chunk of time reserved later for the Q&A. Next slide then. So as I said, welcome on behalf of the Connected Places Catapult to today's webinar. Next slide. For those of you who don't know about CPC, we are the UK's innovation accelerators for city transport and places. We are part of a network funded by Innovate UK of about 9 centres with more than 40 offices around the country. Each catapult looks after a specific topic, and Connected Places Catapult is specifically leading on everything cities, transport and places, as I said. Next slide. Today's meeting, as we briefly mentioned, and for those that have just joined us, is to discuss a newly innovation funding competition that the Department for Transport is funding, and the Connected Places Catapult is leading on their behalf. So you've heard enough from me, and I'm going to soon hand over to my colleague Paul Redfern and Kate Kahn from the Department for Transport, who will give you a bit of background and context around the challenges of this particular innovation funding program. And then you'll hear from my colleague Alex Lamley, who will give you an overview of the competition, the processes, and how you go about applying for it. We've got about 20 to 25 minutes reserved for Q&A at the end, so we'll be able to hopefully get back to all of your questions within today's session. But if that is not the case, we'll take them away, and as Alex will mention, there will be further opportunities to discuss. So on that note, I'll hand over to you, Paul.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Julia. I'm Paul Redfern from National Security, Science and Research Division at the Department for Transport. I'm supported by a number of my colleagues here today. So Kate Kahn, who is one of our subject matter experts in these technologies that we're looking at, and there's a number of my colleagues from around the division and from our policy colleagues in department as well. So thank you very much for everyone for coming and for your interest. It's really good to see so many people. I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview of what the competition is, and then we'll go on to the mechanics of that in a second. Next slide, please. So in aviation, we have a very capable detection system and within airports for the detection of threats. That system has grown for many years, and it's very capable, and we've been increasing the capability over time. But at the same time, the threat picture is growing. So we see that there's a greater threat from homemade and improvised explosives, which can be many things, therefore more difficult to detect. We're seeing that we need to detect precursors to those explosives and threats, and complex concealment strategies of how things are hidden. We're primarily talking about cabin baggage here, so cabin bags that are taken onto a plane where somebody has access, where a perpetrator might have access to those materials. I just want to check, can you hear me? I've just seen the speaker muted. Does that
Yes,
mean
we can hear you, Paul.
You can hear me, okay. Well, fair enough. So we're talking about where somebody takes something onto a plane for a nefarious reason, concealed within a cabin bag. And how that might be done can be very complex. So that threat evolution of how somebody might do that, they look at the screening equipment we've got, and increase the complexity to defeat that. That demands agility from our side, and innovation to make sure that we stay ahead of that threat. Next slide, please. So for the past kind of, I don't know, 20, 30 years, we had a system within cabin baggage that looks at a two-stage approach. So there's a primary detection system. Previously, that was a single view X-ray. Over time, that transferred into a dual view X-ray. So we had still an X-ray system, but multiple views of that bag to make the screener's job easier. And then to a computer tomography system, so we have a full 3D image of that bag in some places. There needs to be a resolution of that of any alarm from that system. So a screener sees something within that X-ray system that they think might be a threat. How do they resolve that? So a secondary alarm resolution technique is generally employed. For explosives, we make great use of explosive trace detection, particulate trace detection. So swabbing of items and bags to look for explosive residue, and liquids detection system. So if anything that might look like a liquid threat is taken out of the bag and put into a liquids detection system of various different technologies. And we've had pretty good success with that in terms of the capability of that to find the threats we want, detects a wide range of threats, and viable false alarm rates. So a lot of this is we can detect threats, but making sure that the system has an operationally viable false alarm rate. So what it's kicking out as potential threats can be dealt with by the whole system, whether that's the front end or the back end. Over the past kind of 10 years, we've been developing the next generation security checkpoint that has a number of different elements to it, including security scanners or body scanners to screen people, different concepts of operation and regulation. But the most relevant part of that next generation security checkpoint for this call is that we've required for all large airports, so that's all airports over 1 million passengers. So the vast majority of the larger UK airports, outbound screening is done by now, or will be done by computer tomography. So all passengers' bags will go through a computer tomography system, high resolution images, making up a 3D image of that bag. That is a large investment. It's taken a long time for us to get there. We're still working through that in some areas, so not all of our lanes and all of our airports have that yet. But the landscape that we'll be talking about over the next few years, once we get all those deployments, is that NGSC will include CT as the primary detection system for large airports. Now, we will still have small airports that still have dual view X-rays and additional screening in different ways to make sure that it's commensurate in small airports. But it gives us the opportunity that where we have an installed base of a large number of CT systems, that we can do a number of different things. We can reduce the operator burden in some way, we can reduce the false alarms, and we can look to implement additional standards for explosives and other threats. So they're a very capable system. What we want to do now is make sure that we are increasing those standards over time, finding more of those threats while still keeping the operator burden down. Next slide. Thanks. So our problem space is we're looking at where we have, for bulk detection in bags, we have the next generation security checkpoint, CT scanners deployed at large airports. Our ambition, as I say, is to adapt that over the coming years, and we're not being very prescriptive just yet on when that will be. That's what we want to work through with some of these calls, is when we could increase the standards on the machine so the explosive detection finds more of the different types of threats. The implications of that then we'd be looking for more liquid threats and more inorganic materials. So a lot of what we find at the moment on from the system is organic materials, because a lot of the explosives that we're interested in are organic. But inorganic threats are something that we want to increase our capability against even further. One of the problems that we have, if we just said on the CT system now on the front end, let's find more liquid threats, inorganic threats, is that the alarm resolution technology that we have on the back end, so explosive trace detection based on ion mass spectrometry and particulate swabbing, won't be able to find all of those materials. So there's a clear candidate for us to say, okay, how might we change that system to be able to detect some of those threats? We're building roadmaps at the moment, which I'll go into in a second, about the options for how we might build that whole system to increase the number of threats the front end finds, and therefore, well, how do we find that through the whole system? Now, we could say at that stage, we need a better back end system that finds more things, but we have the opportunity to say, can we look at it in a wider sense? And whilst we are interested in a better resolution system that finds more things, can we look at the whole system and say, how could we find more of those threats through the whole system? That might be a primary system and a secondary system, or it might be that we look at the whole primary, or we don't have a primary and a secondary, we look at it in a different way. And that's what we'd like to look at in this call. What are the options for saying, how can that system change to find more threats across the piece? There's a couple of things we need to be mindful of. We need to look at equipment certification. So we have a system where anything that is used has to be certified. That certification process at the moment is quite long. It takes quite a bit of time. So we'll be working on that in parallel. If we're working on technologies and they look like they might have a place within the system, one of our jobs to make sure we do in parallel is to make sure that we look at the standards, the testing methodologies and certification of those systems in parallel with developing the capability of the systems. And we need to coordinate with our international partners. There are others looking into this space, primarily in the US and other European nations, about how the system might work. We've got to be mindful of this isn't a system that we're just building for the UK. So we will be collaborating with our international partners to make sure that anything that we're doing, if we're going in a different direction to where we have before, that we're talking to international partners and making sure that we're keeping pace with that, or that they're able to understand what we're doing. That has a benefit to make sure that if we're developing technology, it's not just for a UK market, which, although the UK market for outbound screening is sizable, one of the things we want to make sure that if we are developing technology, that it has the potential to be used worldwide. And so that's something that we're going to make sure we do in parallel as well. Next slide, please. So just in terms of a roadmap that we're looking at, as I said today, we're still implementing next generation security checkpoints. So we're still deploying those CT machines in our airports. We're still deploying security scanners to screen people. Whilst we're quite mature in the UK and have a lot of those deployments already, that's something that we still need to complete before we move on to the next stage of how we might change the system. So we've broken it down into a couple of different roadmaps rather than saying we're gonna shoot for the stars now and everything might change. We know there are some things that are going to be part of this system in the future. So close to market, we know that there is what we're calling automated prohibited items detection, or image on alarm is known in some ways, in some areas. So rather than a screener looking at the image and making a decision on an image, we know that there's very capable systems where the computer can do that now, whether through machine learning or other methods. Could we remove some of the functional capability of the screener and ask an automated algorithm to do that instead? We know that's going to be part of the system going forward in some way. We also want to increase the standards. There's a lot of work going on around open architecture at the moment to make sure that there are standards for how machines work and interoperability of machines. And the thing that we want to make sure that we're working on here, as I say, is resolution updates. So how can we make sure that the resolution techniques stay in pace with all of those other things? So we'll be defining a roadmap over the coming months around the closer to market technologies and how they might all fit together. But we want to also look at the roadmap further out from that. So NGSC, these CT machines that we're putting in place, will have a lifespan of at least 10 years. We're probably looking at 10, 12 years from the costs that we're putting in place right now. We're not expecting to replace those machines straight away, but what might a midlife upgrade look like in some point within those 10, 12 years to make sure that we can still have capability? What other novel revolution methods and concepts can we put around them? And then after that 10, 12 years from now, will we still be looking at a CT-based system, or what might the next equipment procurement cycle look like? Might be completely different, might be the same. We're not absolutely sure at the moment. That's what we want to use this innovation development cycle to say, to de-risk and say, can we have some more certainty around what that might look like in the future? And then the far future. What unknown technologies, wider societal impacts might have a bearing on those roadmaps. So we're breaking that down into a number of different interdependent roadmaps. When I hand over to Alex in a minute, we'll talk about how we're breaking the call down into how your ideas, your innovations and technologies might fit into each of those roadmaps. All of them are areas that we want to look at. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to put this on as my last slide, and then we'll take questions later on the technical aspects. But there's three main areas that we know are going to happen. We want to improve materials coverage and standards. So what we're not necessarily looking at in this call is taking a CT machine and making a slightly better algorithms for explosive detection. That's something we're interested in, but not necessarily in this call. We also know that there's going to be increased automation and facilitation. In the whole, we're interested in ideas that will do increased automation and facilitation, but we're not necessarily interested in looking at APIDS algorithms, so automated prohibited items detection algorithms specifically here. The one thing that we want to look at is how we can improve that secondary resolution capability and how we can look at the system as a whole to make sure that the system as a whole functions. We're going to need all three of those things to be able to move to larger scale detection of different things, or different materials. But it's that thing on the right there, the improved secondary resolution capability or improved whole system capability that we're looking at within this call. But it's going to have to sit within an environment of the other two things as well. So increased automation, prohibited items detection, and materials coverage within EDS. So explosive detection systems, explosive detection algorithms on X-ray machines. They're all interdependent, so we're interested in, if there's an idea that fits across those boundaries, we're interested in all of those things, but it's really the thing on the right. How can we detect, though, if an algorithm on the X-ray machine alarms and says, this is something that needs looking at, how do we look at that in its entirety? Next slide, please. And I think I'm handing over to Alex from Connected Places Catapult around the application process and mechanics of the call. But happy to take questions later.
Thank you, Paul. So, hello from myself. My name is Alex Hamley. I'm an Innovation Funding Manager at the Connected Places Catapult. I work directly with Julia in the Innovation Funding team. So, next slide, please. So, as you know, the Department for Transport has funded this competition with the aim of informing government policy, increasing industry knowledge, and embedding innovation in security processes, with successful projects potentially leading to future live demonstrations, creating new market opportunities, and ensuring that airports are better equipped to detect and deter threats while maintaining efficient operations. So we've covered all that. But to that end, it's been decided that we'd like to open the doors to applications for this program as wide as possible. This is the first time that this kind of funding program has been conducted in this particular sector, so we're really looking forward to seeing all the really interesting ideas that you might all have. One of the few restrictions that we've applied to this competition is that any lead applicants to this competition must be UK registered although they can be UK company of any size. It's also open to academic institutions as well, and we're allowing multiple partners to form consortia in order to apply for funding. There is, however, an interest in scoping out what solutions may exist internationally. As I said previously, we're not entirely sure what potential solutions may exist. So we've cast the net as wide as possible, and that's why we're allowing international partners to apply as part of those consortia. However, the international partners can't receive more than 80% of the grant funding amount, and the lead partner is responsible for directing funding to cover costs incurred by their consortium partners as part of the projects. So the final bit of the eligibility criteria is that you must be able to attend some workshops, meetings in person that we host as part of the program. There won't be many, only 2, but I'll get to that a little bit later about what they'll be composed of. So next slide, please. So moving on to the program timeline, as you know, the competition has now been open for a week, or just over a week now, but we're closing on the 13th of December at 5 p.m. So make sure you don't miss that date. Any lip submissions will not be accepted. So if you are lucky enough to be selected, interviews will be from the 3rd to the 6th of February. So that if you apply, that you keep that date blocked in the diary, as we won't be able to accommodate specific time and date requests for the interviews on that week. After that, there'll be a period of administration where we'll sort out grant documentation to ensure you can start at the beginning of March 2025, with projects finishing by the end of August 2025. After that, there'll be a month where we'll be conducting final payments, monitoring evaluation, and other bits and bobs as well. Next slide, please. So what should you expect from the program? Well, as I said, they start in March 2025. And shortly following that, there'll be a period where we'll be conducting some business needs assessments. This is where we'll be asking you what additional support you'd like to see embedded within the program. And then the feedback from these will then inform our plan of action for our workshops, of which we'll be holding 2 during the 6-month period of program activity. These will be in person. This is why the eligibility criteria involves you attending events and meetings in person. This is all on the application guidance as well, which is available on our website. So throughout the 6 months, we'll also hold regular check-ins, usually around once per month, to see how things are going and if there's any additional support we can provide or any concerns that you'd like to raise, or just any questions you'd like to ask us about the program in general. So finally, the program will be wrapped up with your final reports, and you need to submit these at the end of August 2025. What exactly will be included will depend on your project, but generally it'll be an overview of what you've done during your project, what outputs you generated, and if the expected impact that you had in mind at the beginning, at the start of your program, will occur as planned, and if not, why not? So things like that. Next slide, please. So as part of this competition, there are going to be 3 different tracks of applications. As Paul covered earlier, these will align with the priorities outlined by our colleagues at the Department of Transport. And the first track, which we're calling Emerging Security Innovations, is focused on technology readiness levels 2 to 3. Now, if you're not sure what technology readiness levels or TRLs are, again, they're in the application guidance. You can see where your proposed solution may fit. So that is going to be awarded funding of up to £45,000 per applicant, and we're awarding that to up to 4 projects. The second track is Evolving Security Innovations. This will be focused on solutions with technology readiness levels 4 to 5, with funding of up to £80,000 for, again, up to 4 projects. The final track is a little bit more unusual, as this is exclusively for expressions of interest, and this is only for solutions focused on TRL 6+, and it's an unfunded track. So I'll get to that in a second, but just so you know, in terms of the potential projects you can do, again, we have a list on our application guidance of areas considered of interest and those that are out of scope. So those that are in interest could be considered things such as algorithm updates, new solutions to screen out-of-gauge solutions, combining alternative technologies through a systems of systems approach. It's a pretty wide range, again, all in the application guidance, but just 2 things that are specifically out of scope that Paul didn't already cover. He already covered the other 2. One of them is data fusion, enabling risk-based screening, and the development of technologies focused solely on screening weapons, firearms, and other prohibited items. So if you have those in mind, you may want to consider a different kind of project, or one that focuses on a different aspect. So in terms of this funding, it is provided under minimum financial assistance. So provided you haven't received more than £315,000 worth of subsidy under this scheme in the last 3 years, you should be okay to receive the funding. If you're unsure, please do send us an email to double check this, and we'll be happy to make the calculation for you just to make sure that you'll come under that limit. So when if you get selected for this project, and with projects like these, there's often a temptation to get a bit of a jump start because the time can be relatively limited. But please ensure you don't do this, because only expenditure incurred between the exact start and end dates, as defined as what would be on your grant offer letter, is actually eligible to receive funding against it. So if it's incurred outside of that, it will be done at your own cost. So it's really important to keep that in mind. As I mentioned earlier, it's only lead applicants that are responsible for engaging with the funding team and providing the documentation for things like expenses, and are the only ones paid the grant money. If there's any due to partners, whether they be domestic or international, that is the responsibility of the lead applicant to distribute. And finally, this grant funding can cover costs associated with personnel, equipment, R&D prototyping, consultancy, and expertise, as well as travel and assistance. Just make sure the travel and assistance is related to the project, and then you will all be fine. So next slide, please. So coming back to the application process, so just make sure you review the application guidance that's available on the opportunity page on our website. This is the key document that should inform what you talk about in your application. So when you're actually submitting your answers to the questions, we basically tell you exactly what we're looking for in the different sections. And on the opportunity page, you can also create, that's where the link is to create your application on our Simply Do platform. The application itself composes mostly of due diligence questions, alongside 9 project-related questions and 3 project management documents that you must submit. So this is your project plan, risk register, and finance plan. Again, when completing these, refer back to the application guidance document. I know I keep banging on about it, but it is basically our kind of Bible when it comes to anything regarding the project. It's basically all in there. Again, but if you're unsure, please do feel free to get in touch with us. We have our email there at the bottom of the screen. And again, it's on our website as well, and on our application platform, just in case you need it there. Next slide, please. So again, just as an additional note, this is how the scoring criteria are weighted in your application. I just thought it's worth highlighting here, even though, again, it's in the guidance. So just highlighting it here to make sure that you're aware of it. So we have your proposed solution. This is weighted with a score of 40%. So this is essentially what your solution is going to be. The impact is weighted at 30%. So this is the impact that your solution is intended to have on the airport security landscape. 20% is weighted towards project management. So this is how feasible it is, what your finance plan is, whether we think the project is feasible to deliver. And then 10% is your team. So this is your partners, are they feasible, and also the team that you'll be working with within your business itself. Next slide, please. So here we have the QR code. So as Julie mentioned earlier, we will be having some additional Q&A sessions, or drop-in sessions, as we call them. The first is taking place this Thursday on the 28th of November at 12 p.m, with the second taking place next Tuesday on the 3rd of December. So just use the QR code to register if you'd like. I'll also include a link in the chat when I finished my section, just so you can have that in the chat as well. They will have a bit more of an informal structure. So you can just drop in and out at any point during the open hour and ask any kind of questions that you like. Now, just to note, when it comes to the Q&A here and in these drop-in sections, we will not give guidance on whether or not your specific project is suitable for HADeS. We will give guidance around the generalities, so what is in scope in general, what is out of scope. But if you ask us a question such as, is my specific solution suitable, we cannot give that guidance, advice, because we want to make sure that we don't introduce any bias when it comes to the assessment of these solutions. So next slide, please. And this is for Paul, I believe, just to outline the next steps for the DFT.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. So, I mean, I've put in those roadmaps, and the roadmaps, as you can see, are still a work in progress. So, what we'll be looking at is the effect and the impact of some of the projects and what they'll have on those roadmaps. The expectation is then further stakeholder consultation will happen across the industry with technology providers, but also airports, and we'll be liaising with international partners and looking at other options that others are working on, to make sure that we can start to de-risk some of those options in the roadmaps. There's an expectation from our side that we will be looking at further funding for technologies that come out of this call. I can't confirm that at the moment, so there's no formal phase 2. As you get to the end of this, there will be a phase 2 kind of bid process, but there's an absolute expectation from my side and my team that we will be funding things going forward. It won't just be very good. You've finished that project. Now go and look for options. We will be coming out with more information as we can as to the roadmaps, how people can get involved in that, and specifically how the projects that we funded can look for other funding from the DFT. More to follow on that. I think that's it from me. I'll hand over to Julia.
Thank you, Paul and Kate and Alex. So we now have more time than what we thought for Q&A. So what I would ask is if we can maybe take the slide off screen, and I'll invite my CPC and DFT colleagues to turn their camera on and come on screen. You've heard already from Paul and Alex, but I'll wait for Kate and a few others to join us as well. And before we start the Q&A, maybe we do a quick round of introductions. I'm not sure if Kate is still with us.
Apologies, problems trying to get my microphone off. So good morning, everyone. My name's Kate Cann. As Paul introduced me, I am a member of staff at the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory supporting Paul's team in this specific call. So background in explosive trace detection.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Kate. Paul, anyone else from your team you would like to introduce? You're on mute. We needed one of those.
Thank you, Ben, are you able to jump on? So if you can, I'll just introduce Ben Jones, who is from our policy team at the Department for Transport, and is one of our key people looking at the roadmaps going forward and how some of these technologies will be implemented.
Oh, there he is. I can see Ben.
Thanks, Paul. So, like Paul says, I'm Ben Jones in the Aviation Security Policy Team at DFT, and work very closely with Paul's team on the policy making and regulatory side of bringing some of these technologies into operational use. So, good to see everybody on the call.
And we have a number of subject matter experts in different technologies. So if there are questions that relate to very specific subject matter experts, I will bring them in as and when. So
brilliant. So thank you very much to everyone who's put added questions in the Q&A. Please keep them coming. We'll go through as we go. So there was a quick question. I'll mention it for the benefit of those who have only just joined. As you know, the webinar, as you can see, the webinar is being recorded, and these will be made available on the CPC opportunity page together with a copy of the slides that you've seen from today. So that's answered. Then if I move to, I know, Paul, you recently just mentioned about the roadmap, but we've got a question from Dave asking, with regards to roadmap 1 and roadmap 2, what are the expected timescales for deployment for them?
So we don't have any hard and fast roadmaps at the moment. We're trying to look at phases. In my head at the moment, we're looking at the roadmap 1 and roadmap 2 will be in the deployment time of NGSC. So roadmap 1 could be something that is deployable now with a little bit of work. So in the next 2 to 3 years, well, 1 to 3 years, I'd say. Think about for roadmap 1. For roadmap 2, probably looking at 3 years plus. But then we get into the NGSC midlife. That takes us into the five years or so. The reason they've not got any timescales on at the moment is because we're not absolutely sure what technologies we're going to be looking at, and that's what we want to do with this call. Whilst there are some definite things we want to be looking at, and we expect that we will be looking at things like open architecture and APIDs, periodized detection, how that all fits together, how we deal with the resolution, some of the resolution problems that we will have if we implement higher standards. There's some leeway to move things back and forth, but if there are deployable solutions, we will be looking to deploy in the next kind of 1 to 3 years.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. I'm coming to you, Alex, for the next one from Lance Hiley. If you wish to make an expression of interest, do you make that via the portal, or is there a different point of contact for that? And what format would you like to see?
Yes, so that is submitted through the same portal. So for sake of ease, we've kept it all together in one section. So you just select which, if you're doing track 1, track 2, or an expression of interest. If you do an expression of interest, you don't have to do all the project management questions because obviously we're not funding the project, but the rest of the questions are similar. So you can have as much or as little information as you wish. I would recommend more because the DFT is going to be looking seriously at these for potential different avenues of funding.
Thank you, Alex. I'm coming to you, Paul, for the next one. So just lost it. There we go. From Edelson. I hope I pronounced your name right. Do we have information of what is meant by whole system when you refer to whole system capacity? I believe that was part of your presentation earlier.
Yeah, really good question. Thank you. So we are talking about cabin baggage, so screening of cabin baggage. So whilst the screening of the passenger, their body, is out of scope, what we said in the documentation is we're looking for screening of bags, so hand carried bags, trays or bins, things that are taken off the passenger and go through the system to be screened. Out of gauge, so anything that can't fit through. There are a reasonably small number of things that can't fit through an X-ray machine. So we're talking about things like wheelchairs, buggies, large things that go into the cabin. So that's all in scope. And we are interested in things that will screen bags, but also have some capability for screening of people and other areas, but where the primary capability is the screening of bags and bins. So something that is just the screening of the person is out of scope. Screening of the body, but if there's capability for doing a number of things, then that's in. It just has to have some capability for screening bags and all bins. Why I've said whole system is because I want to make it clear that we're not just talking about resolution. So we're not saying there is an alarm from a CT machine. What do I do with that? If there's an idea that says I'm doing this slightly differently and I'm looking at the whole system and it doesn't actually fit quite with how that works in a primary and secondary, that's definitely within scope, and we'd like to look at different modalities of how we would do that. If anyone of my colleagues thinks I've missed anything there, please jump in.
Silence of agreement, Paul. So let's take it. Let's take it at that. There's a question from Tom Myers, which I see you, Kate, have responded already. Just for the benefit of those that may have similar questions, I'll read it out again, and maybe you can just reiterate what you mentioned in the comments. Tom was asking, are you interested in just chemicals, or would you consider biological threat? And then what is unacceptable detection time?
So I guess I said in the question and answer, so at the moment, biological threats are out of scope of the call. We're focusing specifically on explosives and their precursors and chemical threats. And then on the question about acceptable times, then there is information provided in the technical annex that kind of outlines things as they are currently. So I guess it's kind of you're reading into that is that this is what's acceptable now. Obviously, things that are faster are better, but this is kind of where things are at the moment with the alarm resolution technologies that are currently in place.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kate. Alex, I'm coming back to you, and this is with regards to the different tracks. So maybe just a quick overview on that one. Does the competition require a fully functioning solution to qualify for the funding, or would prototyping and proof of concept be acceptable?
That is absolutely acceptable. All you need to do is just double check which TRL your solution sits at, and then just apply for the specific track that you wish to go for.
Brilliant. Rebecca is asking, can we cover the expression of interest and pathway for applications regarding solution about TRL level 6? So we've covered it with the questions earlier, Rebecca. So it's the same portal, just slightly fewer questions for the expression of interest. If that wasn't clear, please let me know in the comments, and maybe let me know specifically what you would like to know more about that. Just to say to everyone who's interested in applying, those who have already started applying, the form online is quite straightforward. So you'll see as soon as you start going through the form, the questions will automatically sort of pop up for you. So depending on whether you apply for track 1, track 2, or expression of interest, the form will show the correct questions. Is it possible to submit more than one application? Alex? Well, I guess everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it is possible to submit more than one application.
Brilliant. Let me just come up. So we've got Alex. Thank you for answering in the chat. So someone asked if the competition was fully funded or match funded. So that's sorted. Now we've got another question from Dave. Given that some potential technologies come from outside the UK, would the authority consider reducing the 20% spend in the UK and or the need for a UK lead if there is a UK representative to interface to? I will take that in the first instance and then hand over to the panel if they want to add more. So in order to be eligible for this program, sorry, I'm looking over there because I've got 2 screens today. I'm getting a bit confused on where to look at. I'm going to look here. So in order to be eligible for the competition, the lead applicant has to be UK registered. So we cannot accept applications from organisations that are based outside of the UK. That's unfortunately the basic sort of eligibility criteria. However, we do accept foreign partners as part of consortia. So Alex, I'm going to hand over to you on that point.
Yes, so we do allow for overseas partners to be part of consortia. Unfortunately, we can't change the 20% spend that would be allocated to a UK partner if an international partner does choose to join in with them. If you have a UK representative, I mean, it depends on what that representative is. If it's essentially a registered business or registered in the UK as business, that could potentially work without having to split the spend. But what I would say is that if you are concerned or that you aren't able to find a partner, I would suggest making a submission directly to the expression of interest track, because that doesn't require a UK partner. You can just apply straight to that as an international organisation to demonstrate your expression of interest for the programme and then the Department for Transport may get in touch with you directly if it's particularly promising technology. I will say there's no harm in doing both. If you happen to find a UK partner to do something, but then maybe you have another bigger idea that maybe you wouldn't want to work with a smaller SME in the UK, then maybe that's best for the expression of interest track.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Paul, anything you want to add on that?
Not specifically. I think we're trying to encourage international partners within the grounds of what we can do. I would hope that people would be still found within those rules the ability to contribute.
I'm going to stay with you, Paul, for the next one. A person asks, it seems that the call may require a good understanding of the real world scenario. Is it necessary to have the industry or an industry partner if we propose as academics? So if the proposal is led by academics. Also, will there be a particular chance to call for improved automation algorithms if this one is mainly looking at the resolution issues?
So thanks. On the first point, there's no requirement to have an industry partner, so we would welcome calls from academics from a purely academic institution. If you felt that having an industry partner gave you some benefit in understanding the operational capabilities of what you would be doing, then that's up to you to decide that's a better bid. But absolutely, if it's just a single academic institution, that's absolutely fine, and we will look at each bid on its own merits. In terms of the improved automation algorithms, this one is looking at how explosives and chemicals and how we might detect those across the system. There are other things that we are going to be doing as an innovation team. So my team, Capabilities and Innovation for Transport Security, are looking at a number of different calls in the future to support these roadmaps. This is the first one. There will be other opportunities in other areas, and I think not to jump the gun, but there was a question around why are we not looking at people specifically in this call. There will be other opportunities and other calls that we are expecting to put out in the future that look at other parts of the process. This one is just looking, we have to ground it somewhere, and that's the decision we've made.
Brilliant, thank you. You covered 2 in 1. Great job, Paul. I'm going to stay with you for 2 more. So the first one is what level of security accreditation, for instance, ISO 27001 is required? Let's take that one first.
So please jump in on the specifics if anyone disagrees here, but I don't think we've made a specific requirement for any ISO standards, or even for, at the moment, for any security, just blanked on the word.
Accreditation?
Accreditation, thank you, that worked. We've not said there needs to be a minimum level of security accreditation. We can work around some of those things, and if we get to the point where an organisation is straying into that, we will deal with that as and when. There's no immediate requirements for any accreditation to put in a bid at the moment, and we'll work through that if needed.
Brilliant, thank you. Staying with the DFT for the next one, what are exactly the technical expectations for the program? What types of data, prototype builds, demonstrations, etc., that are considered to be appropriate goals during the program? Perhaps it's CPC, DFT, but maybe if you start, Paul, then perhaps Alex
no, hand back over.
Jump in.
So we're trying to be as wide as possible. We want to encourage. There's a list in the documentation bid, but we want to encourage bids from a wide range of aims. So that might be a white paper. It might be something that's just looking purely academically without a prototype, all the way up to prototyping and having something that's fairly ready to go. That's the reason we split it into these TRL levels. So I think I've encouraged you to look at the TRL level of what you're suggesting, but there's no and see which track it fits into, but there's no absolute expectation for we need to build a widget here or a prototype. We want to be as wide as possible, and we will look at each bid in its own merit and based on that. They're not, the funding levels are relatively small comparatively for technology development, so take that as you will and see what is achievable within these funding levels in the different tracks, but there's no absolute requirement. I'll hand over to Alex, and you may have some more specifics on that.
Yeah, just to add, so the technology readiness levels, we use the scale to kind of identify where different solutions sit on a scale of 1 is an idea, and then 9 is fully operational. So we are the track 1 is 2 to 3, which is concept, phase, and early testing. And then track 2 is 4 and 5, which is basic prototyping and advanced testing, moving towards TRL 6, which is a real world prototype. So anything that kind of comes earlier than this, aside from the very earliest, which is TRL 1, is essentially covered within that scale. So if you combine that with the different areas of interest, you should be able to kind of triangulate pretty well exactly where your solution fits and whether or not it will be suitable, or which track rather it'll be suitable. If it's above that, then it's for an expression of interest.
Brilliant, great, thank you both. Again, back to you, Paul. Apologies. Someone is asking, would it be possible to test using simulated data? Are we okay saying that that's okay as long as the TRL for those particular ideas would have to be quite a low TRL, Paul?
Absolutely. So simulated data, or wherever you get your data from, or wherever you think your data that you can use, so either data or testing, we will look at that as an individual bid, but there's no that wouldn't rule you out. We just look for the bid to give some evidence of why you think that is acceptable, or why you think that is the best option for the size of project that we're looking at. So yeah, it would be up to you to say, I think the simulated data for this reason is acceptable, and here's why, and then we will score it based on that. But not an immediate no. We'd encourage
Thank you.
people to.
I hope that answered your question. I believe that was Chao Zhang. Debbie Solberg is asking, is it correct that you are interested, or that within scope of this competition, we will accept ways of improving output from CT scanners that can give more information for liquid inorganic threat detection?
Yeah, so
is this inside the scope?
Yeah. The quick answer is yes. We've tried not to be prescriptive in saying here's some ideas you might look at, but I'd say if it's just I think the way you've asked the question is a good question. If it's just an APID solution and making a better algorithm for APIDs, and then it's out of scope. But if it's something like you've suggested, where one part of the system can connect to another part of the system and has an improved capability for doing that, then I'd say that's something we'd be interested in looking at.
And on that note, Paul, I've moved over to the other chat. Paul Parry is asking, is nuclear and radioactive threat in scope?
I might hand over to Kate on this one, just in terms of the documentation that we've put out to answer that one.
Yeah, I think while it's not specifically said within the call documentation, and yes, it would be out of scope, in the similar vein to the biological threats out of scope. At the moment, we're just focusing on explosive, their precursors, and other chemical threats of interest.
Brilliant, thank you. There is one last question. I'm going to scroll down. I definitely saw it around IP ownership. So first of all, I would advise you to look at the T's and C's available on the opportunity page of the competition. So terms and conditions are available there. These competition will be funded as a grant competition. So it's not only outside of the scope of VAT, but it means that the background and foreground IP will remain with the application participant. So that's pretty much the summary of what you will find in the T's and C's. I can't see any other questions, so I'm going to wait maybe 10 seconds to see if any other applicants have any burning things they'd like to ask, either in the chat or in the Q&A. Meanwhile, perhaps we can remind everyone of the email address. Alex, do you mind maybe posting it in the chat? Should you have any questions between now and submitting your proposal, you can contact Alex and our colleague Becca in the at innovation.funding, apologies, at cp.catapult.org.uk, and your question will be answered as soon as we can. Feel free to look through the documentation. All the information that you need to make a successful proposal is in there. So please look at the documentation. The link is in the chat. And like I said, if you need anything, please reach out. Oh, I can see one more Q&A popping up. Let me see. Consideration on the effect of the technology to passenger queues are outside or within the scope, Paul?
For me, that is within scope in terms of the effect it has on the operation. That's something we'd be interested in knowing what it is. So I obviously don't know what you're considering here, but there's two ways to look at that. If it's something that's just looking at how we might reduce queues, then I'd say that's in scope. And also, if you are looking at a detection or a concept of operation, and you want to know whether to consider what the operational effect would be, then I would say definitely as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul.
We've provided some further information within the guidance document that kind of outlines, areas of concern of airports, things like throughput, cost, training burden, etc. So considering all of those things within the answers you provide as part of your application will be very useful from a scoring point of view. But as I said, those sorts of things are provided within the call document.
Alex?
Yeah, just a quick note. That's in the technical annex, which is in the application guidance, just right at the very bottom as Annex 1, just in case anyone was wondering what that was.
Absolutely. Let's stay with you, Alex. There's one fresh question that has come through, well, from 2 minutes ago, actually. So Joe is asking, could you comment on what exactly we should plan to do? What are the milestones deliverable expected during the program? Maybe an overview of what needs to be uploaded.
Yes. So in terms of the milestones and deliverables, actually a lot of that will be decided by yourself in terms of your project plan. So you will tell us what you think you can achieve as part of this program. We will assess that and whether we think that's feasible and if it's an attractive proposition. Outside of that, there will be a final report that you must do at the very end of the project, which will outline essentially, what you've done, how you did it, what the results, what's the impact you think it will have, or what has it already had, and then that will be submitted to us to release the final payment once we've accepted that. Then there's also going to be 2 workshops during the 6-month active phase, which will be to support any kind of issues or common themes that arise within the cohort of the businesses or organizations that have been accepted. And that's, broadly speaking, most of what there is, aside from just regular check-ins on a roughly monthly basis.
Yeah, exactly that. So, Joel, just let me know in the comments if that answers your question. Make sure that you take into consideration key milestones, so beginning and end reports, monthly engagement sessions with Alex and DFT. So take into consideration some of the usual sort of monthly overhead requirements. But as Alex said, the actual project milestones are dependent on what you would like to deliver. I hope that helps. Again, just let us know in the comments if you'd like to know more. One last question. Let's see, John, what would be considered a successful capability in terms of the range of materials detected? Paul.
It's a very good question, John, and it's something that is a difficult thing to answer without going into classified information. And what we've tried to do is to make sure that we can have as many bidders as possible, is not start off with a position where we need classified information. So I'd like to be able to say, here's a list of things, and we want you to find these things on there. That's quite difficult for me to do. So what I can probably say is, and I'll look to Ben and Kate to support with anything additional, is anything that we cannot find now and we can find in the future is a benefit. Appreciating that without a list in front of me, that's a pretty meaningless statement. So a concentration on more inorganics, liquids, or better detection of things that we already detect is what we're after. If people are in a position where they already know what that is, then great. If not, then there's potential that we can look in the future for classified briefings, but we're not going to be able to do this at the start of this call. So I'll just say more inorganic detection, more liquids detection, and also organic detection, higher detection of concealment within bags. Is probably the most I can say without getting into a classified realm. Ben, Kate, is there anything that you can add from the documentation or just generally?
No, I think that sums up nicely what's within the documentation and kind of the line that we're able to say without crossing over into classified information, which would require people to have appropriate clearances.
Excellent.
I would say one more thing. Sorry, Julie.
Yeah, of course.
If that is a difficulty, and we know it will be for people who don't have access to threat lists and etc. If you tell us what you can do, just give us much information about what the capability of the technology or the concept is, and we will interpret that as best we can.
That's exactly right. And again, if you have any questions throughout the process, please reach out and we'll support. As Alex just posted in the chat, there will be 2 drop-in sessions. Alex, can you remind dates and time, please? I'm hoping I'm not. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry. The first drop-in session will be this Thursday, the 28th of November at 12 p.m. for 1 hour. So the link's in there. So the way it works is if you register for the days that you want, I'll send a Teams link out at some point, either later today or tomorrow, or as they come in for people who want to attend. And then the second drop-in session will be Tuesday, the 3rd of December at 1 p.m. again for 1 hour.
Brilliant, thank you. On that note, I would thank very much all my DFT colleagues and all the Connected Places colleagues and our events team for helping us arranging today's webinar. And we wish you all the very best luck in completing and don't forget submitting by 5 p.m. on the 13th of December your submissions. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day.